All right, folks, settle in. Today's story is about a man who started as your average neighborhood nuisance and somehow morphed into, well, let's just say a federal judge later called him a tsunami of crime. Yep, tsunami. That's not a metaphor you hear every day. This is the chilling tale of Jason Thomas Scott, a guy who proved that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed. Back in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, he was just that kid your mom side-eyed when he walked by. By age 10, police files already labeled him a neighborhood nuisance. Petty thefts, vandalism, the usual stuff. But here's the kicker. Jason wasn't some dropout lurking in alleyways. Oh no, he had a college degree, a steady job at UPS, and neighbors called him smart. Classic wolf in sheep's clothing vibes. And guess what he used that UPS job for? Stalking victims. You know, checking who got fancy packages, who left their homes empty. Efficient, really. Evil, but efficient. By 2008, Jason decided petty theft was for amateurs. He upgraded to armed home invasions. His MO: cut phone lines, disable alarms, smash a window, or hey, maybe you left one unlocked. Pro tip, lock your doors, folks, and boom, he's in. Outfit, all black, head to toe, balaclava, gloves, North Face backpack stuffed with burglary tools. Oh, and a police scanner buzzing in his ear like he's some sort of crime DJ. This guy treated terror like a hobby. But it wasn't just about swiping TVs. Jason thrived on fear. In one invasion, he dragged a woman by her hair through her own house while her husband lay zip-tied. In another, he corralled a family, including 3 kids, into a bedroom, waving a gun like it was a Netflix remote. Survivors said his voice was calm, almost bored. He wasn't frantic, one victim recalled. He was enjoying it. Now, here's where things get real grim. In May 2009, Jason broke into a home and found a photo of a 17-year-old girl. Obsessed, he came back weeks later, hurling a cinder block through a patio door. When she wasn't home, he held her 12-year-old sister at gunpoint. Then, when the family returned, he forced the teen to undress, filmed the assault, and stashed the footage in his bedroom like some sick trophy.
He studied. He would watch TV shows that focused on criminal forensics. And he used that information to help him in his criminal endeavors, whether it was hiding his DNA by always wearing gloves, or turning off his cell phone and going as far to take the battery out of his cell phone because he thought that perhaps the police might be able to trace where his cell phone was at the time of any of these crimes.
Scott, who at times didn't work alone, made use of a database where he worked at UPS to target and gather information on his victims. According to court records, he would case homes and neighborhoods for days, and when he struck, he was armed with not just guns, but the tools of his trade. A break-in kit to pop out small windows and cut phone lines to alarms, a scanner to monitor police activity while his crime was in progress, even flex cuffs. The same tools, evidence shows, he used to break into Shirley Grooms' home, drag her down 2 flights of stairs, and holding her at gunpoint.
When you have absolutely no control over a situation, when you're totally helpless, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's a bad place to be in.
During the home invasion of this house, Scott found a picture of the victim's teen friend, cross-referenced her name in the database, and 3 weeks later, he invaded her home and sexually assaulted the teen. All because he said, quote, she looked nice.
Cops later found it alongside a rape kit. Condoms, lube, and lighter fluid? Yep, because why not add arson to your resume? Turns out that lighter fluid wasn't random. Jason was linked to multiple fires, including a car blaze with 2 bodies inside. Dolores DeWitt, 42, and her 20-year-old daughter, Ebony. They lived a mile from Jason.
The horror began at this home on January 26, 2009, as an intruder neutralized the alarm system and slipped in. Karen Lofton, a 45-year-old nurse, was fatally shot as she tried to hide in this corner. Her 16-year-old daughter was repeatedly shot as she frantically dialed 911 from her bed. Police were perplexed. The doors were locked. No signs of forced entry. Neighbors were terrified.
So they catch him out, we'll be afraid.
2 months later, the bodies of Dolores DeWitt, 42, and her 20-year-old daughter Ebony were found in a burning car less than a mile away from the Loftons' home. Another nurse and a daughter killed.
Coincidence? Yeah, the cops didn't think so. But Jason's ego trip hit peak absurdity in May 2009. Using a law enforcement database he accessed through UPS, because why not? He targeted JC Arms, a gun store in Maryland, smashed his way in, stole 39 firearms, including machine guns, because nothing says low profile like walking out with an arsenal.
To continue his crime wave uninterrupted, ATF agents say Scott thought he needed silencers, so he targeted this Carroll County gun store in Woodbine, located right next to busy train tracks. Timed perfectly between the dark of night and the rumbling of a passing train, Scott broke in to JC Arms. Jay Chenoweth is the owner of JC Arms, a business he runs between shifts as a Baltimore City firefighter.
It just started a 3-year nightmare that I just couldn't wake up from.
Because Scott didn't just take silencers, he pilfered about 30 specialty high-powered guns Chenoweth was licensed to sell. A burglary so well executed, police originally thought it looked like an inside job and considered Chenoweth a suspect.
It just went further and further downhill as we got into this over the last 3 years. It started off with just the loss of the actual inventory, then and the loss of the security. And then I started looking at possibly the loss of my freedom.
Then came the plot twist. Weeks later, Jason tried selling 4 stolen guns to an undercover Fed in his UPS workplace parking lot. Smooth move, Jason. Cops raided his house and found 16 stolen guns, burglary tools, and those nightmare-inducing videos. Game over.
Scott resurfaces and ATF agents get a tip he was selling the stolen guns out of the back of his car in the UPS parking lot. Scott seems to know the risk and explains it to the confidential informant who was wearing a wire for the ATF's undercover buy.
You have to take the numbers off. Because whoever you call with that, they're going to be a alley. I mean, it ain't like no bodies on it or nothing. You just said where it came from.
But ATF can still trace them, and did, back to JC Arms, which ultimately leads to a warrant and evidence of a far darker crime spree.
We followed the trail where the evidence led us, and that led us from a gun store burglary to home invasions to murders to carjackings to just a real violent criminal.
In addition to the guns, ATF found the tools to Scott's trade. The burglary kit, those flex cuffs, his police scanner with earbuds, and what some law enforcement officers call a rape kit. Gloves, condoms, lighter fluid, a lighter to burn DNA evidence, and a camera to record the act. Processing all of it reveals Scott's monstrous acts plotted out in one neighborhood with almost the same precision as his criminal practice. One that would earn him the ire of the judge who, at Scott's sentencing, called him, quote, a tsunami of crime, who showed no indication that he would ever rehabilitate, at least not in this lifetime.
While the feds built their case, Maryland was reeling. 3 mothers and their daughters had been murdered in cold blood. Dolores and Ebony DeWitt burned in a car. Karen and Carissa Lofton shot in their locked home. Vilma Butler found in her torched house, all unsolved, until Jason's name surfaced. Evidence tied him to the DeWitts. Their bodies were linked to an abandoned mansion he used as a hideout. But when prosecutors offered him an Alford plea, that's the I'm not guilty, but you've got evidence plea, he took it. 85 years added to his federal sentence. The catch? The Lofton and Butler cases were dropped. Families were furious. We needed a trial, said Ebony's dad. We needed to see him squirm. At trial, Jason's defense was creative. He claimed his detailed confessions, 28 burglaries, 9 home invasions, child porn, were all lies. Why? Because he was struggling with his sexuality and wanted to fit in. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. The judge hit him with 100 years federally, calling him a tsunami of crime with no hope of rehabilitation. Marcus Hunter got 14 years for the gun heist. But Jason, the ringleader, the sociopath, the guy who, as ATF agent David Chetlak put it, got excited committing these acts. Today, Jason's rotting in prison serving 185 years, but survivors still double-check their locks. One victim said, if I let him control my life, Jason wins.
The man officials labeled a serial killer was finally sentenced today for murder.
Jason Scott is already in prison on other charges, but today in court he faced family members of the women he's accused of killing. Robert Lyles is in Upper Marlboro tonight with why it took so long for this conviction. Robert.
Well, Autry and Leon, he was accused of horrific and sadistic murders of mothers and daughters here in Prince George's County. Now Jason Scott, as you mentioned, already in federal prison on a 100-year sentence, has accepted a plea deal with the state, and this deal will lock him up for multiple lifetimes.
We have now Jason Scott facing 185 years.
Judge Michael Whelan found Jason Scott guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, saying, quote, "I can't imagine or understand the cruel and cold-blooded nature of Mr. Scott's acts." But Jason Scott showed no reaction.
He has always been flat. There's never been an ounce of emotion. I think today was the first time I've heard him speak.
Scott was on trial in February for the murders of mother and daughter Dolores and Ebony DeWitt. But 3 weeks into testimony, a mistrial after an investigator testified Scott was involved in several other crimes. The retrial was scheduled for next month, but the state's attorney announced her office had brokered a deal.
The DeWitt's case was the strongest case we had. We believe we had evidence, strong evidence in the other 2 cases.
Here's the deal. Scott would not have to plead guilty, but instead agree prosecutors had enough evidence to convict him of the first-degree murders of the DeWitts. In exchange, the state would neither pursue charges for murders of mother and daughter Karen and Carissa Lofton, nor the 2008 murder of Vilma Butler of Bowie, Maryland. The families of all 5 victims refused to talk on camera. The state's attorney spoke for them.
It has just been completely devastating that they are relieved. Today, she said, "I just want this finished."
The DeWitt family releases balloons every year. Pink for Ebony, blue for Dolores. "We try to focus on their lives," said their grandma. "But some days, the anger's too much." As for Jason, he's never apologized, never explained, just faded into the void, another monster who hid behind a mask of normalcy. So yeah, lock your doors, folks, because sometimes the scariest stories don't start in haunted houses. They start next door. Life's fragile. Stay safe out there.